Good morning. Oh, it's being one of those mornings so far. My kids secretly woke up an hour early, and they're acting like they woke up an hour early. So, we'll see how worship practice goes here in a little bit. La 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 la. Reading. So, cool stuff today. I even went on a limb and put verses 38 to 42 because I think I can make it through 4 verses this morning, or 5 verses, I guess. And so, let's read. After this, so his crucifixion is done, the bodies are being pulled down. It says, after this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took the body of Jesus. And Nicodemus, who at first came to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. Then they took the body of Jesus and bound it in strips of linen with spices, as the custom of the Jews is to bury. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. So there they laid Jesus because of the Jews' preparation day, for the tomb was nearby. So much cool stuff to cover. Let's see here. Joseph of Arimathea. Here we read about him. Now, let's see what my cross-references mention. So see, in Luke chapter 23, verses 50 and 51. Nope, not 23. Oh, yeah, 23. I'm off a chapter. There we go. It says, behold, was a man named Joseph, a council member, a good and just man. Now, interesting fact, the Talmud records that there was only ever 14 good men on the council. It was actually, it was something more significant than, he was a good guy. He was an outstanding member of the Sanhedrin. He was an upstanding and outstanding man. It says he was a just man. And so we learn a little bit more about him. And it says he did not consider their decision indeed, or he had not consented. They didn't wake him up. So again, they went to get Jesus by night because there were people on the council who were followers, who were believers, and the people who were trying to arrest and crucify Jesus had no interest in bringing them in on this decision. And so it says he was from Arimathea, a city of the Jews, who himself was also waiting for the kingdom of God. Now there's something interesting about this character because he's from Arimathea, which is up to the north, and he's not from Jerusalem, and yet he had a tomb in Jerusalem. The idea that he had a tomb in Jerusalem, not far from the Temple Mount, it just points to the idea that this man was waiting for a kingdom that is to come. That he is excited about what is coming, and he was looking for his Savior. He was looking for the Messiah. So he has this tomb, and I'll mention this too because it says back here in John, it was a new tomb in which no one had been laid. So the idea with this tomb is that no one had ever used it before. He was the first person to ever use the tomb. Jesus was. Some people question the garden tomb because they say, well, the garden tomb was constructed in such a way that it's more common to the tombs you would have found a few centuries earlier, more of like an Iron Age tomb rather than, And here's one of my thoughts is, this guy had a tomb chiseled out of the rock. Okay, it is pure stone. And someone gets there with a hammer and a chisel and you can walk into the first room and then look over to the second room where the burial section is. This was no cheap endeavor. It is just my personal belief that if someone can afford to build such a room, they can design it however they want. You see, in the first century when Jesus lived, tombs looked a little different most often. But it was also just because that's the way they were being built, simple and easy. But when you're rich, you can build a tomb any way you want. Anyway, that's just one of the reasons why some people doubt the Garden Tomb as a location. But I go, he made a custom tomb. He probably had it paid for, and maybe he went for a throwback design because the guy was nostalgic. For what it's worth, he didn't really associate with the guys of his age. He was looking back 400 years earlier or more. So, all that said, it is a new tomb. He was waiting for the kingdom. And in Matthew 27, it says that it was hewn out of the rock, is where we get that it was literally dug out of the face of the stone. So he comes and asks for Jesus. And then we have Nicodemus. Now, you can go back maybe and do a rerun of John chapter 3, verse 1, where I did a long talk on Nicodemus Ben Gurion, who he was it the second or third? I don't remember. Richest man in Jerusalem. I think he was the third richest man in all of Jerusalem. He was the brother of Josephus, the famous historian that we get a lot of these quotes, these Josephus quotes from. All that said, though, these guys get him. They put 100 pounds of spices. Now, for what it's worth, the word here is a Jewish pound, which is only 12 ounces compared to our 16-ounce English pound. So it's actually 75 pounds by what you and I would know. But it was 100 Jewish pounds, kind of like coffee cups. You know, you say I drank 3 cups of coffee, but coffee is measured by a smaller cup. It's a 6-ounce cup, not an 8-ounce cup. So anyway, now you know more about coffee too. Let's take a moment for our sponsors. Coffee makes us happy. So, they wrap them up with all these spices, and it's insane. This is a kingly burial, which is interesting because we have then the Old Testament prophecies that talk about how he would die in a way that was among thieves and among commoners, right? And yet he'd be buried like a king. And this tomb and these spices is a kingly burial. I'm going to skip and then come back. We'll finish on verse 40, actually. And so there is the garden and the tomb. And so if you go to the garden tomb, and I say not a great distance, it is actually a very close distance. I would say, what is it? A couple of you have been there before. Chime in. 50 yards? 100 yards? It's under 100 yards. It's got to be under 100 yards from the foot of Calvary over the garden tomb. It's not a real long ways. And so they walk them over there to where the tomb is. There's a garden there. So if you go to the garden tomb on the north side, I could go more and more. There's all these cool things about how when you do a sacrifice at the tabernacle, the instructions, the original instructions for the tabernacle, of which the temple was just a greater version of. So what they did at the tabernacle, they did the same stuff at the temple, just in greater amounts and bigger sizes. But the animals, the sacrifices, were brought to the north side of the altar, and that's where they would slay the animals. They take the animal to the north side, that is where it would be sacrificed. Jesus taken to the north side of the Temple Mount, the north side of the city. Church of Holy Sepulchre is on the west side. But all that said, you take him up to the north, he's crucified there, and then you see this garden. Now, what they found at the garden tomb was a gigantic cistern where they would have kept the water to water the garden. And then there was an ancient press where they would press the stuff in the garden. So it's established that right there at the tomb, there was an ancient garden. And so all this cool stuff so you can understand and just better understand. And I think, like people say, Golgotha, Calvary, to me, that's a no-brainer. That is the place where he was crucified. The garden tomb? There's a real good chance. Do we know for sure? No. That's the main thing. Is that, there could be another tomb buried somewhere. But it is a tomb that does meet the descriptions. It has the trough in front of it where a large stone would get rolled. You can see, there's one place on the road, if you're heading, from Megiddo up towards the Galilee, past Nazareth, on one of the highways there, you can still see a tomb with the rolling stone. Usually the stones were taken and stolen because they were a good piece of flat rock and they were good building materials. So years and years later, people would steal those stones and use them. So the one at Jesus' tomb is no longer there. All that said, how am I doing on time? Probably rambling way too much. Let's just wrap up, because here's the thing is, In verse 40, it says, they took the body of Jesus, bound it with strips of linen, with spices, as the custom of the Jews is to bury. Here is Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin. Here is Nicodemus Ben Gurion, again in John, he's called the teacher of the Jews, giving him a distinctive role of being the most renowned teacher in the land. It's the preparation day. While the bodies are being taken down, the rest of the priests are at the temple, and they're sacrificing the lambs. They're sacrificing the Passover lambs. Remember, Passover from Exodus, when they left, the only thing that could save those people from death was the blood of a spotless lamb. When death came, it did not care if they were Jewish or Egyptian. It only cared if there was blood covering that household. And so this celebration that they continue to do year after year is one of their most holy days, the day that they remember that they were set free from slavery, baptized in the sea with Moses, in that life of the wilderness as they entered into the promised land. But you see, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus Ben Gurion would not be there that day. They would not be there practicing the Passover, one of the most beautiful and important days of their whole year, because they defiled themselves. You see, the priests wouldn't enter the praetorium, because if they entered that Gentile place, they would not have been allowed to partake in the feast nor enter the temple, because they were defiled. They touched a dead thing. You know your Old Testament, you know you can't touch dead things and then go up to the tabernacle or the temple. Well, these two men knew exactly what they were doing when they touched that dead body of Jesus Christ. You know, often it was the women who would wrap the bodies, but these men took it upon themselves, and they wrapped him with the linen. They washed him. There is a whole beautiful traditional burial process you can learn about. Washing his body, wrapping him with the linen, taking care of that body before burying it. And that night they didn't do the Passover, because they had already beheld and held their Passover lamb, slain at the same time. While Jesus was on the cross saying, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do," only a few hundred yards away on the Temple Mount were the cries of the lambs being slaughtered for the Passover. So that's the idea, is that, man, these guys, they touched a dead thing, they defiled themselves, but they did it knowing that the veil was now torn, that man could now boldly approach the throne of grace through Jesus Christ. No longer do we have to worry about ceremonial cleanliness. Ceremonial cleanliness. God does not want us to sin. He doesn't want us just, well, I got grace, I can live however I want. But no longer do we have to have our tassels on our cloaks. No eating pork, no eating bats, though 2020 would teach us not eating bats might be an important thing. So there we go, is that we don't have to follow the law anymore. We are under grace. And these men in grace, they take him and they bury him in the tomb. Matthew 27, 62 to 66, you can go read that on your own if you want to know a little more about this day and how it ended, where the priests go request that a guard be set over the tomb, lest someone come and take the body and the deception be worse than the first. So read that on your own time. God bless you guys. Hope to see many of you tomorrow. I hope we enjoy this time out at the park and that it'll be a memorable one. God bless you guys.